welcome everybody. How are we doing? Great. Phenomenal. My name is Tony Thompson. I'm a scholarly assistant professor here in the Murrow College, and I'm honored to be the moderator of this panel. From press box to the front office, the business of sports communication. The nice thing about that title is it got you in the room. Are we going to talk all about that? No, because I want this to be something that is a little bit more conversational. I will have maybe a couple questions for the group, and then I see a lot of people from my classes. I expect you to pony up and start asking some questions. You have some kick-ass people on this panel. I want you to pick their brains on how they got to where they are, and let's have some fun with this, okay? So, those of you who've had my class, we start off class, or we end class with a 2 claps and a Ric Flair. So can I get 2 claps and a Ric Flair? What? Yeah. Okay, so I also do not like introducing people the standard way on a panel. So I found people who know our folks, and I talked to them and asked them about our panelists. So we will start off with Jasmine Nye. Jasmine is so much fun and brings a refreshing and upbeat energy to everything she does. She's a hard worker and really cares about quality work and what she puts out into the world. She's tackled challenges when she was in corporate, and it's awesome to see her bloom as an entrepreneur. So, Jasmine, can you talk a little bit about your sports background?
Yes. Is this on?
Probably not.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good. Okay, if anybody knows the reference. I'm Jasmine Nye. I'm really happy to be here today. I'm a class of 2013 from the Murrow College. I'm sorry I can't see all of you, but I promise I'm... Oh, hi, Mark Dice. You are here. Anyway, I grew up in sport. I'm actually a natural-born Husky. My father was on the football team in 1990, 1991 with Mario Bailey, who seems to be very popular at this event. I have a cousin named Gary Payton, who maybe some of you have heard of, Mark McGuire. All this sounds very exciting, and it was as a kid, but as a woman, I didn't see myself reflected, so I really didn't see myself going into sport at all, and I spent the first half of my career completely flailing. Ask Mark Dice Ryan about that, he can tell you some of it, and the second half of my career, I ended up at Adidas, and that was when I felt like I was home, and I felt like I could take that passion and the way that I grew up in sport and actually find a way to implement that, and also kind of help inject some representation for women in sport. So I spent some time, 7.5 years, corporate comms at Adidas, Nike, and then I ended that at Columbia Sportswear. I left that role about 2 months ago, as Tony alluded to run my own small business. So I'm excited to talk about the past 7.5 years, and if you want to pick my brain about anything else, I'm an open book.
Lisa Johnson. Lisa, let's turn on that mic too. She is ambitious and very involved in every aspect of the athletic department. She brings a fresh perspective to the Palouse and has a vision for the Cougs that propels us into being a future leader of the new Pac-12. Yeah. She also loves Starbucks and Trader Joe's. So, Lisa, tell us about yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Johnson. I have been in sports since I graduated college. I was in sport before I graduated college. I was a student athlete. And then I went the typical route. I had internships at the Oakland A's, and then I worked for the Seattle Mariners for a number of years. I actually did some stuff with the Sonics with Gary Payton. He was the Gary Payton of chicken or something. It was an ad campaign. And then I went on and I got to work in some minor league. I opened up a team called Tacoma Rockets. And then I moved to Southern California, and I got to open up IHL teams, International Hockey League teams. I then got to work for my beloved LA Dodgers that I've been a fan of. That's my why, since I was 5 years old. I opened up a Mexican soccer team, all in Spanish, and I don't speak Spanish. And then I finished my team side, my pro team side, on the Anaheim Ducks and won a Stanley Cup. I have a Stanley Cup ring. That was great. I don't have a Super Bowl ring. And then I went into sports tech. I wanted to do something new, so I was bringing technology to venues and sports teams and things like that. But I got that bug again about working in sports. And so last year I worked for FIFA, and then I joined the team here. I'm GM of the Washington State University Athletics MMR program, Multimedia Rights Program. So it's called Cougar Sports Properties, and I'm GM. So that's my sports background.
Mike Flood. So I got a couple people, and I was actually in tears reading some of these texts. His passion for our organization, our community, and of course the Cougs is unmatched. One of my favorite things about working for the Seahawks is when I tell people I work here, the first thing they ask me is if I know Mike Flood. I also, Mark, I'm glad that you brought up a food-related story in yours, because I got another food-related story for you, Mike. Somebody told me that Mike Flood holds the VMAC, Virginia Mason Athletic Center. For those of you who don't know, that's where the that's the Seahawks facility. He holds the VMAC record for hosting 3 different community lunch groups in one day. A full plate in every single lunch group. And he said he's iconic. So let's give it up for Mike Flood.
My competitive background started as a freshman at WSU when I was entered into the hamburger eating contest at Arctic Circle. And so they had me, I was a freshman, they had me out running, you know, and a little towel around my neck like I was going to get in a boxing match. And I got down there, and the hamburgers are easier to eat if you dunk them in something. So the guy that didn't like me, an older guy, said, "What do you want in your hamburgers?" I said, "Anything other than green soda." So he got me green soda. So I ate 12 in 15 minutes, and the winner threw up a couple times, but I ate 12. I should have been the champ. I'm really I should be contesting that to this day. But anyhow, that was anyhow, now I work for the Seahawks, and I worked in, when I was at WSU, I was in comms my freshman year, and then I changed my major about 4 more times and ended up flying for the Coast Guard. But I've been with the Seahawks now and run admin, like our own public works version. I started Seahawks.com when we didn't even have a website back in 96, 97, and started the IT department so they could digitize football video and stuff like that. So I ran a lot, because they didn't have any departmental setup when I got there. It was really weird. And not even an evaluation system. So we set all that stuff up when Paul bought the team, Paul Allen from WSU days. And that's my sports background has been working with people in all these different fields like you guys are, and trying to make sure that we connect with people from all different cultures and backgrounds. That's what I do now.
Sweet. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks.
He already got an applause on the front side, so we're going to go straight to Marcia. No. Marcia Steele Hoover. She's Irish, loves to golf, and is the best mentor to our Murrow students. She stays in touch with her mentees long term and truly cares about them as people. She is also an amazing cook, prove it, and almost always has on something Nike.
Yay.
Yay! I saw the Cortezes, I'm like, oh, nice. So, Marcia, tell them about yourself.
You bet. So thank you for having me. If we're talking about sports literally is in my DNA. My father was a NCAA coach, and he was the Olympic coach for the 1980 men's gymnastics team that was boycotted in Russia. I was a sports broadcasting major when I was here at Murrow, and many of you have heard my story and know that back when I graduated, there were not a lot of women in sports broadcasting. So my career took lots of twists and turns and ups and downs, similar to what Anna talked about yesterday. And I spent the bulk of my career coming full circle at Nike. So being an athlete, I played competitive sports in college and high school. I'm still a competitive athlete today. But I spent my time at Nike. And at Nike, I led all of the internal employee communications for 80,000 employees globally. And I loved it. And I worked with employees. And part of that, when I say internal employee communications, what I mean is how do we build culture? How do we build community? How do we build engagement with everyone internally around the world focused on sport? So I look forward to sharing some more stories with you today.
Okay, like I said, I will ask a couple questions to the panelists, and the way I like to run these panels, I like to have the audience involved. So if something sparks, you want to ask questions, we will hand the mic to you, and we'll go from there. So my first question for the panelists is, how has effective storytelling impacted your role? Jasmine, if you'd like to start off.
Which role? Entrepreneurship feels like a sport, but I'll keep you guys in the sports world since that's what we're talking about today. Sport is so fast-paced. It goes so fast, blink and you miss it. And if you don't kind of catch up on that storytelling, whether that's internal, like Marcia alluded to, or externally with your consumer, with your fans, or anybody who's bought into your brand, you're gonna fall behind. So being as effective and efficient and fast while still accurate as possible is something that was kind of the bread and butter of how I was able to be successful in this field. I also kind of let myself fall into a generalist role. At first I resisted it, but once I realized, okay, I can kind of dip into external communications and maybe I'm over here in internal communications. And then I realized, wait, I can go so much faster between all of these things because I have a little bit of knowledge of all these different spaces. So that was a pretty big differentiator for me, especially in my sportswear section of my career and continues to be in my entrepreneurial side of my career.
Lisa, how about yourself?
Well, I took the career path that I went into sales. Oh, I'm not on, am I? I turned it on. So I took the career path that I went into sales. So storytelling and communication is essential. In fact, 20 minutes before I was here, I gave a pitch that was an hour long to a category that would never buy a sponsorship, and I had to make the relationship and the correlation. So storytelling gives me the opportunity to paint the picture and make the correlation that really tells them the why they need to do something. Why do they need to act on this behalf? And, you know, most people don't want to act on or spend money or do things. So storytelling gives me the ability, if I do it well, to be able to get somebody to do something they didn't really want to do to begin with. And that's magic. So for all of you that are considering maybe, you know, gosh, could I end up in sales? You can absolutely end up in sales. You just have to be able to tell a good story.
I think whatever audience you're talking to, there's going to be a story from your organization or your background that relates to them. And if it's compelling, tell it. And I do that all the time. It kind of comes naturally because you see situations that people are in or what they're looking to do, and you've got examples of how it worked for you and your company. So tell them, and you're going to connect with people that way.
Even if it's a burger eating contest, right?
Yeah.
You know, I think it's interesting. Storytelling is this buzzword that's been around for the last 5 to 8 years. But the reality is we've been telling stories for thousands of years. And so where storytelling came about is really how you tell the stories. That's what has really changed, right? In the past, it's the technology that we use to share those stories. So when we think about what is that impact, the obvious impact of storytelling for me is just the channels that we leverage. That's the output. But what I would share with you is the most important thing that Mike alluded to is who's your audience, right? Because unless you understand your audience and you understand what channel that they want to receive it from, what story do they want to hear, who are they? What will make them take action, as Lisa said? Only then can you tell a compelling and relevant story. So yes, the channel is important, storytelling is important, but unless you understand your audience first and foremost, the story doesn't matter.
Yeah, so I want to say also that our digital media staff does a great job of analyzing every platform and what people like to hear on that platform. And then we study that statistically through our data analytics team. But then for the men and women who work on putting stories together, how long should it be? What are they really looking for? How long should it be for that platform? And we do a pretty good job. We're in the top 3 in almost every category in that regard because we pay attention and we try and tell the right story. And it really helps people connect to the team. It helps sponsors appreciate the team.
Lisa, you had a point when we met on Zoom that I really loved, and it was talking about establishing a why. And I was hoping I could put you on the spot a little bit about how do you establish a why with those you work with or for?
Thanks. I love that question. So a couple years ago, I was working for a little tiny company called SeatGeek. Has anybody heard about SeatGeek?
Yeah.
And it's a challenger brand. And it's a challenger brand. It's trying to go up against Ticketmaster. And The guy I was working for was actually one of my first bosses ever in my career. I was an inside salesperson. I was peddling tickets, and he reminded me that we had to go into this situation with why. And why is it important that I understand why you do what you do? Why is it important that I understand why this is important to you? And why is one of those magical doorways. It's really the ability to know somebody, right? When somebody tells you their why, you have an opportunity to kind of look at life from their viewpoint, and it's vulnerable and it's transparent, and it's a trust mechanism for them to really want to connect with you. And so why is important. If you don't know your why are you here? Why are you doing? Why do you want a degree? Why do you want this job? Why do you want to work in sports? And for me, my why, I say it at the beginning, I was 5 years old and I would take a bus to Dodger Stadium to meet my dad. And my dad was really busy. And so I would get these 9 innings with my dad, just he and I, and it was magical for me. It was unbelievable to get this time with my dad. And I'll never forget it. And so it didn't matter to me what was going on the field. It really didn't, although I did love that they had this thing called the Big Blue Wrecking Crew. And anybody under 40 may have known Tommy Lasorda, Ron Sade. Anyways, they were magic. But it was this opportunity to experience something with my dad that I wasn't otherwise going to do. And I've been working in sports ever since. And so you understanding my why, it really tells you a lot about me and what was important to me, where my values are. And so creating your why, really understanding it, and then communicating it to people will open up doorways of transparency, vulnerability, and relationship.
Whoever else wants to tackle that question, because I think it makes a lot of sense.
You know, I would love to add an "and" to that, if I may, from a completely opposite perspective that I think is very complementary. Because when I think about why, I will tell you throughout my entire career, I've worked in a communications team, but I've served audiences who are not communicators. And so they are always asking me, Marcia, why should I do this? Because they don't understand it. You know, I worked for the executives at Nike. You work for a finance guy. You know, maybe it's a brand guy, doesn't really understand the intricacies, or the CEO, a business guy. And they're always saying, why should I do this, Marcia? So half of our time as communicators is really spent educating our audiences on why they should do it. Because oftentimes, and you guys probably know this, when we do communication, when we tell them the why, when we tell them how we approach things, the process, the tools, the channels we'll use, the message, la, 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 it's kind of in one ear and out the other. But when they feel it, when they see it, when you show it to them, only then do they understand the why, because they see it and they feel it, as opposed to, I'm going to give you a strategy and idea of what we're doing and it's on paper, but they're like, I don't get it. So think about that as communicators coming out. What you know is very clear to you, but you're always having to articulate and explain and educate your audience on how you're trying to help them achieve their goals. So asking yourself and asking them, what is your why? What are you trying to accomplish? And how can I not just get you there, but how can I show you and demonstrate to you the output that we will collectively get to through that why? Make sense?
Good answer.
Anybody else want to tackle it? No pressure. No pressure. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to bring it out to the crowd. Who has? I knew it. Alex, do you actually have a question, or are you going to actually take my mic? Cool.
No.
Take it. Go for it.
Is this our 49er fan?
Yes, it is.
Oh, boy.
Hi. So my question isn't so much about communications, but more, I've been interested about this and more from the front office perspective of running a sports team. With the increase in valuation of sports franchises, like the Lakers getting sold for $10 billion over summer, and the availability of private equity money like we saw in Utah, how does that change the overall approach to running a sports franchise?
Oh, I got a good answer here. what we're hoping is going to happen is there's business practices. That's what we hope is going to happen. I don't know the feedback
That there's
there.
business.
Business practices. So I know when I started, teams didn't operate like a business. And for some, you have to understand anytime you're dealing with a sports team, especially in pros, you're dealing with revenue that only comes in for maybe 6 months out of every year, expenses that go out for 12 months every year. And those business practices, most of us from 30, 40 years ago, we grew up in sports, right? So we didn't have another influence outside of sports on how to run a business. So to me, what private equity is doing, first of all, it's just making the valuation insane. But secondly, what it's doing is it's putting some business rigor into that, being able to make board reports and shareholder reports and things like that. It's only making us be more cognizant on the pro side of our revenues, how we manage them, how we turn them into 12-month operations. And again, I'm on the revenue side, so I can speak to that. I'm sure Mike can speak on the pro side, but it's definitely created a professionalism in professional sports.
I agree, and the business analytics is a big part of that too, to figure out exactly where you stand, and so you can show that to prospective buyers too. But when I joined the Hawks, there was no business analytics, and even up until, 10, 12 years ago, there was not much, but now we have 10 men and women analyzing everything we do in a very scientific way, so we understand exactly what people think about us in different categories, different types of people, different ages, all that stuff.
Thank you. Hi, guys. I'm Connor, the other 49ers fan. Anyways, so I really liked when you guys were talking about like the why and how that's just so important. And I think when I think about the why, I think that's kind of tied to people's like moral and ethic values. So what are some of the moral and ethic values that you guys have that have helped you be so successful in your career fields?
Oh, good one. Yeah, I love this question. Back in 2020, I was with one of the companies that I mentioned, and it was a very challenging time for me personally, and I think for everyone else in the world, right? There was a little pandemic going around, people were sick. But on top of that, there was a lot of civil unrest as it related to race in the United States. And I had the unique privilege of being the only Black woman on that communications team in the world at the time. And so I kind of became this case study of one, which was a very interesting experience as well. But what it also forced me to do was bring in my ethics and bring in my morals to work in a way that I never really had to. It was not appropriate to, quite frankly. But as a company that has a lot of Black athletes externally facing, suddenly that was part of our issues that we were managing externally and internally. And there's an instance I recall specifically where there was another shooting involving a Black man and a police officer, and I was very emotional, and I called my manager and I said, hey, I don't really know what we need to do, but we need to get ready for something. And my manager was a great manager. She wanted to really coach me and make me better, and she took that moment to coach me, and maybe that was not quite the best way to do it. She asked me, how does that relate to our strategy? And I'm emotional. I'm like, I don't really know. And I finally gave up. I kind of relented and said, you're right, this has nothing to do with our strategy. Within an hour, every major sports league shut down. And then it was a part of our strategy. So I think it's taking your ethics, taking your morals, and staying as rooted in them as you possibly can. That was, for me, I was about a halfway point through my career, and I just wasn't as confident and rooted in that. So if you can build that muscle now, it'll take you really far throughout your entire career.
Can I add on to that for just a second? Because I want to double up on or double down on what Mike said during his talk earlier, and he talked about the Zen, right? That really resonated with me,
Yeah.
And really understanding what you're rooted in and what's important to you. And for those mentees that I have out in the audience, we talk a lot about what is our brand value, what do we stand for, and how important that is to recognize in yourself early on. So then that establishes that moral compass that you have and that you live and that you breathe by every day, because we are all in life and in career faced with situations that challenge that moral compass. And if you have spent any time thinking and establishing and identifying what that is for you, that becomes your litmus test, right? Then you can say, does this agree? Do I align with that or not? And if so or not, how do I move forward? But it's on you early on to know what that is. And so I challenge all of you to spend some time and think about what Mike said this morning too, and think about what that is for you. And how do you start to use that as a litmus test moving forward?
Yeah, and I think it's, besides what's just inside of you, if you've ever heard the term Tao, it's what's inside everything. And if you can identify that in a very pure way, then your own ethics and behavior will be governed by that, and you'll be able to relate to everybody.
When I started in Major League Baseball, there were only 2 women that were manager levels in all of Major League Baseball. Myself and a woman named Laura Day, who went on to become EVP of Minnesota Twins. And at that time, there was a lot of sexual harassment from players, for sure. Back in the day, people didn't take us very seriously as women. They were sure that we were out doing something that we shouldn't be doing with players and things like that. And then I got to the Dodgers, and the Dodgers, 1 year before I got there, had not allowed women in the lunchroom. So where they would feed male employees for free every day, women were not allowed, and women were given soup on the outside, soup to eat, to take back to their desk. And that's the reality of the industry that I chose to work in. And so throughout my career, it's been like such a pleasure to see, for me, it was important. It was life challenging and heartbreaking to watch this. But as I watch women be able to take a bigger role in sports, that was important to me, to pave the way and find women who wanted to work in ticket sales or in sponsorship sales and things like that, and give them an opportunity to grow. It's really funny now, women don't have to face those same obstacles, so they don't realize what it's like. But we have the same thing. You're at a certain point, you age out of the sports industry. Women do, men do, it happens across. And so it's really holding those values close. That's important to me, to keep promoting women. But it was also, I had to learn patience. I had to learn, I had this on my desk, is this a mountain I want to die on? Because change wasn't going to happen just because I asked for it and things like that. So I had to be part of the solution, but also have the patience to work on that. So hopefully you have your values and what you can live with and what you can't live with, because specifically, since we're on a sports panel, those things come up. There are things that you're not going to agree with, whether they're political or whether they're economic. And you have to, if you're a broadcaster, you have to be able to stand in your truth and still be patient.
I don't know who goes first.
Hi, I'm Hunter. Don't worry, I'm a huge Seahawks fan.
Awesome.
My question for you is, how does current day American politics, mostly regarding like the aggressiveness and the increase of like the separation of the two sides, how does that affect how you have to go about your job and running like a sports organization?
I don't think it hurts us too bad, because we come at it from a perspective that, like in the parade, I think I mentioned earlier that I walked in that thing with the governor, the mayor, and some military folks behind the players and the mascot, who was just as crazy as ever. But we had 1 million people out there of every different political persuasion, culture, age, background, all that stuff. And it's a beautiful thing to see them. I think, actually, there's probably a picture on that screen of me walking over to somebody that had a sign that said, "Thank you, Paul, thank you, Jody." But, and on game day, there's the political side of things is not a big factor for us. And the way you tell the stories is going to be more about the things that you talked about, what's essential inside of us. So the players are getting that story told about themselves. And we're doing that on a community outreach platform. And Mario Bailey and Becca and that team are doing the same thing. They're out there serving people in a beautiful way that's intrinsic to everybody. So we don't have to get into the political side of things. We can just find the things that join everybody together and be a part of it. It's a wonderful place to be.
Can I add to that? From the brand perspective, at least at the organizations that I was at, there was a necessity to communicate on that. There was an expectation that the brands came out and voiced something. If there wasn't, there's like we hear about it, and it starts to actually affect the business. And then specifically for Columbia Sportswear Company, if you follow them on Instagram or in any regard, there comes a point where some of the political decisions that are being made, especially at the federal level, actually start to affect our business. If people cannot go outdoors, they are not going to buy our jackets if they're taking those lands and using them for other things. So when it starts to affect the business, I think that's where the messaging starts to go from, do we need to say anything on this, to this is now going to affect our bottom line.
I want to have a dissenting opinion slightly with what Mike said. And so I just moved here 7 months ago from Los Angeles, which is why Tony talked about Trader Joe's, and I'm missing it very, very much. Last summer, ICE came to Los Angeles first, and I was working with FIFA, and the ICE agents absolutely targeted Hispanic events in Los Angeles during that time. They set up encampments and things like that, whether it was us, whether it was Angel City, whether it was LAFC, and it was planned and it was awful. It was absolutely awful for the staff. It was awful for the residents, something that we should be really enjoying. And so there was a decision. Does FIFA talk about it? Do they not talk about it? And they decided not to talk about it because they were going to have World Cup this year and they didn't want to make waves. But Angel City Football Club went out and said, this isn't okay. And so we have a voice as professional sports teams. We have followers and listeners and all of those things. And so organization that somebody talked about culture, they either are going to have the culture that says that they are brave enough to go out and take a stand on this, or they're not. And either one is okay, but you are always called upon to voice something when you are a professional sports team. Everyone is always asking, well, how do you sit on this, especially when you're talking about the attendance coming to FIFA events and things like that. And so when you're in that position, you have to, that's part of what communication and crisis communication and things like that. You have to decide, are we going to be the kind of brand that makes a statement when these things happen politically, or are we going to be the kind of brand that doesn't make a statement? And I think that's really a defining point on the culture of that organization.
I just had a follow-up, if I could, please. Pardon me, a little hot mic here. Third 49er fan in the room, and a diehard Giants fan. So, speaking of culture, the question: how do you sort of balance the equation between talent, tolerance, and character, athlete character, in this new media environment?
Yeah. Wow. So maybe we've heard of Kanye West. I had been at Adidas less than 1 month when I got pulled into a meeting saying we were going to have 2 private Kanye West concerts on campus for employees only. And I'm like, okay. And then they say, and there's going to be a 75-person choir. Okay. And we need to get all these tickets and everything distributed and all, and set it all up in less than a week. And at that time, he hadn't quite made those statements that we all know today, if you're familiar, that he's made now, and things have just fizzled out entirely. But I do think that there's a point where brands are able to connect with that talent and, be able to massage whatever's been done if there's a good crisis manager that's able to do that. But then you also have to recognize when the line has been crossed and when that's over. And so I was gone from the brand when that moment ultimately happened, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. But again, I think was it Marcia, you have that litmus. And so when you know that you've crossed that line, it's game over, and knowing what that line is.
Hi, my name is Brendan. First off, Miss Hoover, I had the chance to hear you speak in my Com 138 class in the fall, so it's a pleasure to see you back here again today. I took a lot away from that day. One thing I specifically remember you stressing on was culture building, and I heard that again from Mr. Flood at breakfast and again on this panel. So my question is, what's the most difficult part of culture building and getting people to buy in? And how exactly does culture building and ethics translate to business and sport?
I'm going to have Marcia finish that one because I got to talk to her yesterday a lot about that, and it's fascinating how she does that with huge organizations. I think for us, one example of that would be when Coach McDonald came in, he and John Schneider, the general manager, realized that they thought alike. That's why John hired Mike. But it comes into an appreciation for people and wanting to build a connected team. Everybody wants to do that. Everybody's got slogans. So how do you get beyond that? Well, they hired people like Michael Gervais, who'd worked with us before, and others who have a real genuine philosophy about how people should treat each other. And then they got into specifics about what do we do during the course of the year, and they decided there would be, I think it was about 15 times when instead of practicing, they would have different parts of the team get together in different groups and talk about their why and how their lives had gone and how do they end up here. And that reinforced a certain connectedness that you could see during the course of the year, like when Ernest stood up for Sam Darnold after a tough game he had in LA, and just a lot of stuff like that. These guys really became united. And it's not as tough to do it on a football team. And by the way, John Schneider always referred to 70 people on this team, not just the 53, not just the starters, but 70. Like, we're all part of this thing. And so when you saw reserve players come in this year, they were effective, more effective than I've ever seen before, because they all felt like they had a role and they could be counted on at any time to do something. But when you talk about huge organizations doing that, what Marcia told me yesterday, I don't know how she does it, but you've got to have, because you can, in the Seahawks, we can get people to believe, and we hired people based on knowing that they were like that, but I don't know how you, in larger companies, can get a whole company to adopt a certain healthy philosophy about what they want to do.
And it's not easy. It's not easy. And the reality is, not everyone, you can't assume that everyone will buy into that culture. But I will reinforce again, and you guys hear me talk about this over and over, you have to understand your audience. You have to understand, again, Mike brought it up this morning, what is that connective tissue that brings everybody together? And you have to seek that out, right? And I will tell you, a common foundation, at least at Nike, so you find that common foundation. At Nike, it's sport. So when I was there, it was over 85% of all employees either played high school, collegiate, or professional sport. That's a connective tissue. We're athletes and we're competitive. And we have certain behaviors that are defined by that. How do you bring that to life in South Africa, in Korea, in Mexico, through different culture? It's not hard, but it's not easy, and it takes time. And I will also say that you will see pendulums shift in culture depending on the organizational leadership, right? That's where consistency of leadership, or at least in those values and that brand integrity, can be really important. So I could talk days about how you do that. I'm super passionate about it. It can happen, but it starts with the audience, and it starts with what is that connective tissue that brings everybody together.
Okay, this side got a lot of play, so we're gonna go over here for one more question.
Hi, Lisa. Concerned Coug here. We have 12 basketball players in the transfer portal already after the season. Obviously, in this new NIL era, Washington State has the identity's changed. We kind of feel like we're a stepping stone school. And how do we get the community to buy in and the players to buy in a small market like Pullman?
I ask that question every single day. And if you want an internship, let's figure it out together. That's the hardest thing. Like, I didn't experience this working on the pro side, right? Didn't experience this. We didn't have NIL. We didn't have athletes that are choosing dollars over values, right? They were athletes that wanted to go to school here and get a good education. What's really unique about Pullman, for all of you, is there's not a lot here, right? So I'm going to go somewhere dark, but it absolutely amazes me that we don't have daily fentanyl deaths and things like that. Where I live, that's a common occurrence. I would be terrified to send my kids to school in Los Angeles because of that. So it's finding the right NIL money. And so I'm already going to tell you, athletics is the front door of a college. If we want to continue to have students, we've got to have a strong athletics program, because that's what there is to do here, and that's what entices new students to come. And then we have to give them a good, safe education, and we have to get parents to want to send their kids here. And we got to start winning, because people want to go to winning teams. But it is a problem that literally everybody in the athletics department asks that question all day long, and we don't have a great answer right now. But what we're doing is trying a lot of theories. I think if you haven't met Coach Moore, first of all, y'all got to come to every single sport. I got to say this, the student participation coming to games, I was embarrassed. Those women's basketball, I'm not shading you guys, but women's basketball, there are more people in attendance at their high school games than there was for their college games. And that's sad. We need to get behind our teams. We need to get behind these student athletes, and we have to give them a reason to want to win. And I hope when we do that over time, and with more alumni donation and things like that, we're in a fighting chance, because we are fighting for our lives right now. Thank you.
Can I add? I feel like Marcia, yes, clap. I feel like Marcia might have some interesting insights, because you were at Nike for decades, right? And Beaverton is not the most inspiring metropolis area, but you all were able to still secure top talent, even when they came to visit. Like, do you have any inferences from that as it relates to Pullman and bringing athletes here and getting them excited about the culture?
It's culture.
Oh, there we go.
That's the answer, and that's why it's so important, right? What gets people fired up?
Yeah.
Why do they want? How can you make it a destination, right? And we've heard forever, well, it's the Palouse, we're out in the middle of nowhere. I flippin' love it out in the middle of nowhere, people.
Me too.
I can't even tell you how much I love it. Can we turn that on its heels, please? And actually make it a positive rather than a negative? It's the ultimate college experience. What does that say?
Trader Joe's.
All right, okay.
In Beaverton's defense, there's 2 Trader Joe's.
No
So
said. No said. All right, moving on.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Can we give him a round of applause?
Don't worry. Yeah, just